Joining us now is Peter Baker, New York Times chief White House correspondent and MSNBC political analyst, and former Deputy Chief of Staff for Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, Caroline Zier. Welcome to you both. So, Caroline, President Trump wanted to hold a similar parade to the one that is happening today during his first term. Military leaders at the time, they were adamantly opposed to such a display of military might in a democracy. Donald Trump is getting his wish now. Give me your response to this military spectacle, and that it coincides with the president's birthday. Does that complicate interpretations?
Alex, thanks for having me. It certainly does complicate interpretations. I would say at the outset that any opportunity to celebrate 250 years of unbroken, proud service of soldiers in the armed forces and our country, and for the American people to understand the sacrifices of those service members and their families, that should be applauded. But this is not about deterring our enemies. It's not about exercising and training. Those are usually what you can find our armed forces doing. And there's a reason we don't have a tradition of military parades in this country. It's because countries where those parades happen with troops and capabilities on display are usually hollow forces that are being used to prop up and in some cases are going against their own people. It's anathema to what our armed forces is, and I certainly hope that what happens out of this is Americans are focused on the armed forces and not on the politics that our military is being thrust into.
And look, to that point, you make a point that sometimes it's used to prop up. The United States of America does not need to prop up the strength of its military. We know we are the strongest fighting force in the world. So, Peter, let's talk about your latest piece in which you write that Trump was unbothered when, in his first term, a four-star general told him, quote, "It's what dictators do," when he brought up staging a military parade. And you write, as president, Trump has used the military to serve his political goals. How has he done that, Peter? And what do you think we should expect to hear from him when he speaks at the reviewing stand at that parade? Peter, turn your microphone on, my friend.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
One of the legacies of 250 years of the Army is its tradition of being a nonpartisan armed force, right? That the Army doesn't serve a politician, it serves the country. It serves the office of the commander-in-chief, not the political presidency in that sense. But President Trump obviously doesn't see it quite that way. Just the other day, he gave a speech at Fort Bragg that sounded more like a campaign speech than it did the words of a commander-in-chief. He denigrated Democrats. He talked about his own election. He claimed the 2020 election was rigged, which is, of course, not true. And the troops cheered him as if they were part of a political rally. Every time I've seen a president speak to a military audience, even when they're describing policies, the audience keeps quiet because it's not their job to be a cheerleader for the commander-in-chief. It's their job to carry out lawful orders of the commander-in-chief. And he is, of course, he doesn't look at it that way. He looks at the military as a function of his personal power. During his first term, he asked his White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, himself a retired four-star Marine general, he said, "Why can't you generals be loyal like the German generals," by which he meant Adolf Hitler's generals in World War II. John Kelly, as he recalls this, says he told him, "Well, you know, they tried to kill him, right?" But Kelly, his interpretation of what he heard there was a president who didn't see the traditional rules about how a president uses the military, but instead sees it as his own personal instrument of power. We should add that President Trump denies that he said that. But, Kelly has many other examples. Other aides who have been around President Trump have heard him say things that made them question his interpretation of how the military is to be used as well.
Mm-hmm.